Tucked away in the folds of a mist-shrouded valley, where the mountains seem to guard their secrets jealously, lies a village unlike any other. From above, it appears peaceful, almost picturesque, a scattering of stone cottages, smoke curling lazily from chimneys, and cobbled lanes that twist like veins through the landscape. But beneath this serene facade, an unsettling truth festers, one that historians, travelers, and even locals approach with a careful mixture of reverence and fear. For here, in this secluded settlement, there are no cemeteries. No gravestones stand silent under the sun. No mourners gather to lay the dead to rest. And yet, people have lived, and died, here for generations. It is a story that begins with whispers. Tourists who stumbled upon the village speak of an uncanny emptiness, a quiet that presses against the eardrums, as though the air itself mourns or conceals. The locals, when asked about death, grow hesitant. Their eyes flicker with memory, with something they dare not name. Some shake their heads, others offer cryptic warnings, "You don't ask about the dead here." And it is this evasiveness, this chilling refusal, that first draws the curious in, and keeps them from leaving the village without a sense of unease. One elderly villager, her hands gnarled with age and labor, once shared a story to an outsider who had insisted on asking. She spoke of a night long ago, when a child vanished from the doorway of their home, leaving only the echo of a mother's scream in the empty streets. The villagers searched, the mountains were searched, but the child was never found. And over time, other names disappeared in similar, inexplicable fashion. Each vanishing left no mark, no record, no trace. When historians later examined the village registry, they found detailed accounts of births, marriages, and lives lived, but no burials. It was as though death itself had been rewritten in this place, removed from the natural order. The mystery gnaws at the mind. How can a village exist for centuries without recording the final act of life? What fate befalls those who die here? Scholars have suggested everything from deliberate concealment to forgotten burial grounds, but none of their theories have satisfied the unsettling pattern. And then there are the occasional photographs, blurred, seemingly mundane images of village streets, where some swear they have seen fleeting shadows or figures vanishing into thin air. As the sun sets and the village plunges into a muted twilight, the atmosphere thickens. Smoke from chimneys forms ghostly ribbons that dissolve into the dusky sky. The silence is broken only by the occasional crow, the distant barking of a dog, or the soft murmur of the wind through the trees. It is in this half-light that the village's true nature begins to reveal itself, a place that defies the laws of life and death, that guards its secrets with a stubborn, almost sentient will. By the end of this first night, the visitor feels a chill not born of the cold. There is an awareness that something vital is missing, a piece of existence that should be palpable yet is curiously absent. And lingering in that silence, unanswered and pressing, is the most haunting question of all: if no one has ever been buried here, where, then, do the dead go? The answer, shrouded in layers of time and secrecy, waits patiently to be uncovered, a puzzle that will lead the curious deep into the heart of one of history's most unsettling mysteries. The village's location is as much a character in this story as the people themselves, a remote pocket of land carved out by time and nature. Nestled between jagged ridges, the settlement is surrounded by thick forests that seem to consume the horizon, their trees so dense that sunlight struggles to pierce the canopy. Rivers wind unpredictably through the valley, disappearing into rocky crevices, only to reappear miles downstream. For centuries, these natural barriers have protected the village from intrusion, preserving its customs, its isolation, and, perhaps, its secrets. Outsiders approach cautiously, often deterred by the treacherous terrain or by the unsettling stories that seem to drift on the wind before one even reaches the outskirts. On a map, the village appears almost unreal, an anomaly amidst the surrounding settlements. Roads leading in are narrow and winding, forcing travelers to navigate hairpin turns and steep slopes. In winter, snow seals the passes entirely, cutting off the village from the outside world for months at a time. This isolation has bred self-reliance among the villagers but also a profound sense of suspicion toward strangers. The geography itself feels complicit in the village's mystery, a natural fortress guarding centuries of untold stories. There is a haunting poetry in the way the mountains loom over the settlement, casting long shadows that stretch across the cobbled streets, as if the landscape itself has become a sentinel over the dead. Aerial photographs reveal another layer of intrigue. From above, the village layout is irregular. Cottages cluster together in patterns that seem almost intentional, with open spaces whose purpose is unclear. Some researchers have speculated that these voids could have once been fields, ceremonial grounds, or even unmarked graves, though there is no evidence to support this. Satellite images show strange depressions in the earth, shallow and circular, that cannot be explained by natural erosion alone. Locals refuse to speak about these areas, calling them the forgotten places, and their refusal adds another layer of tension to the investigation. What lies in these sunken patches? And why is the village so determined to leave them undisturbed? The forest surrounding the village is itself a labyrinth. Ancient trees grow so close together that travelers often lose their bearings, even in daylight. Moss and fog coat every surface, softening the ground and muting footsteps, creating the sensation of walking through a dream, or a trap. Hunters tell stories of wandering endlessly, only to emerge near the village entrance, convinced that the forest itself guided them back. It is easy to imagine that such an environment could hide both the living and the dead, concealing secrets beneath its foliage for decades, even centuries. The geography here does not simply exist, it participates in the narrative, shaping the behavior of those who live within it and deterring those who would pry too deeply. Beyond the immediate surroundings, the valley widens into rolling hills dotted with abandoned structures, some roofless and crumbling, others strangely preserved as if frozen in time. Many of these buildings once belonged to families that vanished without explanation. Explorers have noted unusual alignments of stones and pathways that do not correspond to practical village planning. Some suspect that these were markers, deliberate or ritualistic, placed to maintain secrecy over what happens to the dead. Others suggest that the patterns are coincidental, a trick of perspective, but even the skeptics admit that the place carries an intangible sense of order, a hidden logic that outsiders cannot decode. At dusk, when shadows lengthen and the valley is bathed in muted amber light, the village takes on an almost otherworldly quality. Mist seeps from the forest floor, curling around the cottages and winding lanes like a living thing. The mountains close in, amplifying every sound, the creak of timber, the whisper of wind, the distant echo of a dog's bark. It is in these moments that the geography reveals its psychological effect, a subtle pressure on the mind, an insistence that the world outside does not belong here. It primes the visitor for the revelations to come, setting the stage for the more unsettling truths about life, and death, within the village. Ultimately, the geography of the village is more than physical, it is symbolic. The isolation, the labyrinthine woods, the unyielding mountains, and the enigmatic depressions all point to a deeper truth. The landscape itself has shielded the village, preserved its secrets, and enforced a boundary between what is known and what is deliberately hidden. It leaves the outsider with an unmistakable impression that the village is a place apart, one where normal rules do not apply, and where even the most fundamental aspect of existence, death, is cloaked in mystery. As night falls, one question lingers, pressing against reason and common sense. In a place so deliberately concealed, could the truth about the unburied dead finally be discovered, or would the geography itself ensure it remained forever out of reach? In a village where the mountains and forests conceal so much, the absence of cemeteries becomes all the more glaring. Historical records, when they can be found, present a puzzling contradiction. Births are meticulously recorded, marriages are celebrated with documented fanfare. Entire generations of villagers are accounted for in parish registries and local archives. Yet when it comes to the dead, the pages fall eerily silent. No tombstones, no burial plots, no funerary inscriptions exist. Researchers who have attempted to trace family lineages are often met with the same unnerving pattern: lives accounted for, deaths entirely absent. It is as though a fundamental chapter of existence was deliberately excised from history. The mystery grows sharper when personal stories are considered. One family, whose lineage stretches back over a century in the village, has detailed records of births spanning several generations. Yet when the descendants sought to find the resting place of a great-grandmother, they were met with empty fields and overgrown grass where cemeteries should have been. Their search became a journey through silence, guided only by the memories of the eldest villagers who spoke in hushed tones. Some recalled seeing coffins carried away under the cover of darkness, others insisted that the bodies were never taken to a grave at all. The conflicting narratives only deepened the sense of unease. In this village, death seemed simultaneously acknowledged and erased. Archival investigation reveals further anomalies. Church registries from neighboring towns mention travelers passing through the village and, on occasion, note deaths. Yet these records are fragmented, sporadic, and often contradictory. In some instances, a child born in the village is documented to have died, yet no burial is recorded in any known cemetery nearby. Scholars have speculated that unrecorded burials might have occurred in hidden groves, in caves, or even in private plots, but extensive surveys have yet to uncover any definitive evidence. The more researchers probe, the more the trail grows cold, leaving them with a sense of frustration and creeping dread. Humanizing the story makes the mystery even more poignant. Consider a young woman, the latest in a line of villagers, who came searching for her missing brother, a boy who vanished without warning decades ago. Her grandparents' memories were fragmented, stories fading like ink in sunlight. They could recount only fleeting glimpses, the boy playing near the forest edge, the sound of a scream, the sudden silence that followed. No grave, no marker, no trace remained. Her quest to locate him, mirroring the efforts of countless families over the centuries, underscores a chilling reality. In this village, the dead have no resting place, and their absence becomes a living wound for those left behind. The lack of burial sites is not merely a historical curiosity, it shapes the social and emotional fabric of the village. Grief manifests differently here. Mourning is private, whispered, almost ritualistic in its secrecy. Families tell stories to honor the lost, but they do so cautiously, aware that the act of speaking might disturb forces or traditions best left alone. Visitors often sense this unease immediately. A question as simple as, "Where is the cemetery?" can silence an entire room. The villager's response is not always fear, it is a mixture of respect, warning, and a subtle assertion that some matters are beyond inquiry. The unmarked dead, in essence, exist as both absence and presence, a paradox that hovers over every aspect of life in the village. Some investigators have turned to science, hoping to detect anomalies beneath the village itself. Soil studies reveal depressions and inconsistencies that suggest something, burials, pits, or voids, lies beneath the surface. Yet attempts to excavate or explore these areas are often thwarted by local resistance, regulations, or the treacherous geography itself. The land seems unwilling to reveal its secrets easily, and the deeper the investigation goes, the more the village asserts its silent dominion over the dead. Each failed attempt to uncover evidence adds tension, a slow burn that leaves both researchers and viewers questioning what forces, natural, cultural, or supernatural, might be at play. Folklore further complicates understanding. Tales speak of spirits that cannot rest, of bodies that vanish before burial, and of ancient practices long abandoned but never forgotten. Some stories describe secretive nocturnal processions, others hint at underground chambers where rituals took place. While skeptics dismiss these as myths, the consistency of such accounts across generations suggests that something deeply rooted in village culture informs the handling of death. It is here, at the intersection of history, legend, and human memory, that the story's emotional power intensifies. Families who lived with these traditions carry their grief privately, adding a human weight to the otherwise inexplicable phenomenon. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the unmarked dead is the psychological effect on those who live among the vanished. Children grow up hearing stories without context, adults navigate loss without closure, and visitors are confronted with an omnipresent silence where mourning should exist. Even those who have never witnessed a disappearance feel the weight of absence. Each unanswered question, where are the bodies, why were they never buried, what traditions dictated such secrecy, creates a tension that lingers like a shadow over daily life. By the end of this section, the stakes become clear. The village is not merely a place with missing cemeteries, it is a labyrinth of human lives, cultural memory, and historical concealment. Each unmarked death is a thread in a tapestry of mystery, leading investigators, historians, and curious outsiders deeper into questions that touch upon mortality, tradition, and the unknown. The narrative tension crescendos, leaving one final, haunting thought to bridge into the next stage of the story. If no one has been laid to rest in the village, then the truth of their fate remains buried, not in the earth, but in time itself, waiting for discovery. The written records offer a skeleton of the village's past, but it is the oral histories that bring its haunting truth to life. Elders, perched on creaking wooden benches outside their cottages, speak in hushed tones, as if the words themselves might summon unwanted attention. Their stories are fragmented, layered with superstition, and yet consistent across generations. Each tale hints at disappearances, strange phenomena, and rituals that outsiders can barely comprehend. It is in these whispered accounts that the tension begins to thicken, creating a narrative that is both elusive and irresistible. One man, his voice trembling slightly, recounts an event from his youth. A family down the lane had lost a child under mysterious circumstances. They say the child walked into the forest one night and never returned, he said, eyes fixed on some distant memory. Some nights, the cries can still be heard, carried by the wind. No one dares investigate further. The forest is sacrosanct, a place that consumes both body and memory. The story is not singular. Across the village, variations of this theme repeat, vanishings without explanation, people seemingly swallowed by the land itself, and an enduring cultural insistence that these events remain unspoken outside the community. Women in the village add another layer to the narrative. They speak of quiet ceremonies, conducted far from prying eyes, designed to honor the dead in ways unknown to outsiders. Candles flicker in abandoned spaces, small offerings left by those who grieve without a grave. One elderly woman describes a night when she followed the procession of cloaked figures to a hidden grove. I saw no bodies, she whispered, but I felt the presence of those who had gone. Such testimony deepens the sense of mystery, hinting at secretive rituals whose meaning has been lost to time but whose emotional resonance remains palpable. The stories of disappearance are often accompanied by warnings. Villagers speak of certain places within the forest, or particular hours of the day, that are forbidden to outsiders. Some claim that to cross these boundaries invites a curse, while others assert that the land itself protects its secrets. Children are taught early to respect these invisible rules, internalizing a sense of awe and fear that persists into adulthood. The oral histories are not mere tales, they are behavioral guides, shaping generations and embedding the inexplicable into the very rhythm of village life. Curiously, the consistency of these oral accounts suggests a collective memory that defies natural erosion. Historians and anthropologists who have interviewed villagers note overlapping details, shadowy figures glimpsed at the forest edge, sudden silences descending upon households, and the quiet, almost ceremonial removal of those who vanish. While skeptics argue that such stories are colored by superstition, the repetition and similarity across decades imply an underlying truth, or at the very least, a shared recognition of events that cannot be easily dismissed. Tension heightens when these whispered stories intersect with personal loss. Families who have lost loved ones describe grief that is both intimate and public, ritualized yet invisible. Mourning in the village is a performance of absence, a candle lit on a windowsill, a whispered prayer in the forest, a name spoken softly in the night. There are no markers, no cemeteries, but the human need to remember persists. These traditions, conveyed orally, preserve memory even in the absence of physical proof, a testament to the villagers' resilience and their complex relationship with death. Investigators entering the village quickly sense the subtle barriers created by these oral histories. Questions are met with hesitation, glances exchanged, and sometimes outright silence. Yet, persistence yields fragments of clarity. An elder might recall a secret tunnel, a hidden chamber, or a ceremony performed decades ago. A younger villager may mention symbols etched into walls or trees, dismissing them as mere decoration but inadvertently providing crucial clues. The oral histories, though cryptic, are threaded with hints, and careful listeners begin to assemble a map of secrecy layered atop the village's geography. There is also the intangible element of fear. Visitors report a pervasive sense of being watched, a subtle pressure that grows as they learn more. The villagers' stories are not simply anecdotes, they are warnings embedded in time, a cultural mechanism to enforce discretion. Even casual remarks carry weight, a slip of a name, a hint of a location, or a fleeting acknowledgement of the unburied dead can change the tone of an entire conversation. The oral history acts as both shield and guide, directing those who wish to understand while protecting the deepest truths from exposure. By the end of this section, the interplay between legend, memory, and human emotion becomes undeniable. The village is revealed as a living archive of grief and secrecy, where each whisper carries a weight far greater than its words. The oral histories do more than preserve the past, they shape the present, influencing behavior, belief, and perception. And as the investigator or curious visitor delves deeper, the cumulative effect is both mesmerizing and disquieting. The unmarked dead are not only absent from the earth, they linger in the stories, shadows of memory and imagination. The tension now reaches a natural pause, setting the stage for the first concrete clues to emerge. While oral histories provide context and atmosphere, they also leave crucial questions unanswered. What, if anything, exists beneath the surface? How much of the mystery is human design, and how much is something older, something inexplicable? These unanswered questions propel the narrative forward, creating anticipation for the next stage of the investigation, where patterns, anomalies, and the first tangible evidence begin to hint at a truth that has eluded discovery for generations. After months of listening to whispers and tracing fragmented oral histories, the first tangible clues began to surface. What started as an academic curiosity quickly turned into a hands-on investigation. Soil tests, aerial surveys, and archival research combined to reveal patterns that had eluded casual observers for centuries. At first, these anomalies were subtle, a slight depression in the earth here, an unusually aligned row of stones there, but as the team dug deeper, the picture grew more unsettling. The village, which appeared ordinary at first glance, was layered with evidence of something hidden, something deliberate. The first breakthrough came when a soil analysis revealed inconsistencies in a central field, a space locals had long avoided. Layers of disturbed earth suggested that something had been buried and removed repeatedly over time. Unlike typical graves, there were no remnants of coffins, no skeletal fragments, nothing physical remained. The soil had been intentionally manipulated, concealing its history with meticulous care. Investigators began to consider the possibility that the village's unmarked dead were not lost to nature or chance, but rather to calculated human design, a methodical effort to erase their presence from the surface of the world. A skeptical historian, Dr. Elena Korv, joined the investigation with the intent of debunking the myths. She walked the winding streets with measured steps, taking notes, photographing structures, and interviewing villagers. Yet even she could not ignore the subtle, almost imperceptible patterns in the landscape, stone alignments forming geometric shapes visible only from above, paths that led nowhere, and depressions whose size and spacing defied natural explanation. Each discovery, small on its own, coalesced into a narrative that hinted at a systematic approach to something dark, something hidden in plain sight. The anthropologist, Dr. Rajiv Malhotra, contributed a new dimension to the investigation. He focused on the human element, examining cultural practices, oral histories, and symbols etched into buildings and trees. One particular marking, a series of concentric circles near a cluster of cottages, suggested a ceremonial function, perhaps related to death or disappearance. Villagers claimed it was just decoration, but Dr. Malhotra's expertise in historical ritual suggested otherwise. The combination of environmental anomalies and symbolic markers began to create a compelling, if terrifying, picture. The village's secret was not merely a quirk of geography or superstition, but a deliberate, long-standing system of concealment. Maps, both modern and historical, provided additional insight. Cartographers had often ignored this village due to its isolation, but when cross-referenced with land surveys from the previous century, patterns emerged. Certain areas of the village, particularly open fields and forest edges, were conspicuously absent from property records. Paths that appeared on some maps vanished on others, and depressions visible in aerial images did not correspond with any topographical feature recorded in official documents. It became increasingly clear that the village itself had been systematically altered, its very layout a mask for the hidden truths beneath it. The first site excavation provided an unsettling, almost cinematic revelation. Armed with minimal tools and guided by historical maps, the team began probing the central field. Beneath the topsoil, layers of carefully packed earth hinted at repeated activity, depressions filled, compacted, and concealed. No bones were found, no remains of coffins, only evidence that something, or multiple somethings, had been methodically hidden over generations. The villagers watched from a distance, their expressions unreadable, a mixture of curiosity and quiet disapproval. The investigators realized they were confronting a practice that had persisted over centuries, one that blurred the line between the natural and the human-made, the seen and the unseen. As the investigation progressed, a network of tunnels and underground spaces began to surface. Initially dismissed as natural caves, closer inspection revealed clear signs of human modification, reinforced walls, hidden chambers, and entry points concealed by brush and stone. Some tunnels appeared designed for access during rituals, others seemed intended for concealment. The discovery of these subterranean structures added both clarity and horror. The village's mystery was not simply in the absence of graves but in the presence of spaces designed to hide life and death from view. Every layer peeled back seemed to deepen the enigma, creating a mounting tension that gripped both the investigators and the audience following the story. Small artifacts found within the tunnel suggested a ritualistic purpose. Candles, remnants of ceremonial cloth, and objects of unclear significance were scattered in patterns that hinted at practices long forgotten but carefully preserved. Carbon dating indicated that some items were centuries old, suggesting that the concealment of the dead was not a recent phenomenon but a tradition passed down through generations. Each artifact became a keyhole through which the investigators could glimpse the village's hidden history, though the full picture remained frustratingly just out of reach. The human dimension of these discoveries cannot be overstated. Investigators spoke with villagers whose ancestors had participated in these rituals, either willingly or under societal expectation. Their accounts, filled with reverence and fear, humanized the mystery. They described a culture where the line between respect for the dead and concealment of mortality was razor-thin, where grief was private but the methods of hiding death were communal. The juxtaposition of meticulous care and secrecy added layers of complexity, challenging investigators to reconcile empathy with horror. By the end of this first phase of investigation, the stakes had escalated dramatically. The evidence, though incomplete, painted a picture of a village with an extraordinary and unsettling mastery over the fate of its dead. Patterns in soil, symbolic markings, tunnels, and artifacts all pointed toward a deliberate concealment, one maintained over generations with discipline and ritualistic precision. The cumulative effect was an eerie realization: the mystery of the unmarked dead was far from anecdotal legend. It was tangible, traceable, and disturbingly systematic. The first clues had emerged, yet they raised more questions than answers. Who initiated these practices, and why? Were they meant to protect the living, honor the dead, or something far darker? And most chillingly, what would happen if the investigators uncovered the full extent of the village's hidden past? These questions, unanswered and pressing, created a natural bridge to the next stage of the story, where patterns of disappearance, victim profiles, and the vanishing phenomenon would take center stage, propelling the narrative into deeper suspense. The village's secret extends far beyond its unmarked graves and hidden tunnels. The vanishing phenomenon, a pattern of disappearances spanning decades, becomes the defining mystery of this place. Each case is unique, yet a disturbing similarity threads them together: people vanish without warning, leaving behind only fleeting traces of their existence. Families remember birthdays, marriages, and daily routines, yet their loved ones' final moments remain unknowable. Investigators and historians alike are confronted with a chilling question: what force, human or otherwise, orchestrates these vanishings, and why does the village seem untouched by the consequences? One of the earliest documented cases involves a boy named Tomas, who disappeared one foggy morning while fetching water from a nearby stream. His mother watched from the doorway as he ran ahead, laughing, oblivious to the shadow that would swallow him. Villagers searched for days, combed the forest, and even consulted neighboring towns. No body, no clothing, no sign of struggle, nothing. The trauma rippled through the village, yet the event seemed almost normalized in the collective consciousness. Elderly villagers later recalled similar cases from their youth, describing a quiet resignation that strange disappearances were part of life here, an accepted, terrifying pattern. The vanishings span all ages and social positions. Children, adults, and the elderly alike have succumbed to the phenomenon. Some were laborers returning from the fields, others travelers passing through, and a few were prominent village figures whose absences left voids in both family and community life. Investigators began to notice eerie coincidences. Many disappearances occurred near forest edges, fields long considered off-limits, or areas marked by subtle depressions in the earth. The pattern suggested intentionality, yet no one could definitively explain the cause or mechanism behind these vanishings. Families carry the emotional weight of these losses differently. Some maintain hope that the missing will return, others grieve quietly, performing ritualized acts of remembrance without ever visiting a grave. One woman described lighting a candle every evening for her missing brother, speaking to him as if he were in another room. Another family keeps a vacant chair at the table during every meal, a silent acknowledgement of absence. These human responses, while small and personal, emphasize the deep psychological impact of living amid a place where death does not follow the expected course and closure is impossible. Investigators began compiling detailed profiles of victims, attempting to discern patterns that could offer insight. Age, occupation, and behavior were charted alongside environmental factors such as location, time of disappearance, and proximity to landmarks. While no single explanation emerged, certain anomalies became apparent. A disproportionate number of disappearances occurred on moonless nights, or during foggy mornings when visibility was low. Shadows, strange noises, and fleeting figures were consistently reported by those who had witnessed the final moments before a person vanished. The data, while inconclusive, formed a chilling mosaic of events pointing to a phenomenon both systematic and inexplicable. Psychological studies of villagers revealed a community simultaneously shaped by fear and resilience. Children were taught from a young age to respect the forest, to avoid certain areas, and to never speak openly of the vanished. Adults navigated daily life under the unspoken understanding that anyone could disappear. Even casual visitors felt the weight of this tension, an invisible pressure that lingered in the air, in conversations, and in the gaze of those who had experienced loss firsthand. The vanishings were not merely incidents, they were cultural forces, influencing behavior, belief, and the collective identity of the village. Some disappearances seemed to defy explanation entirely. Travelers passing through would vanish after brief encounters with villagers, leaving only the last spoken words as evidence. One such case involved a merchant named Harlan, who arrived with goods and intentions to trade. By evening, he had vanished, his cart abandoned on the roadside, items intact and untouched. Local testimony described hearing distant footsteps in the forest, followed by silence. His family never received word of his fate, and modern investigators found no trace of him in any nearby town or registry. Such cases added to the pervasive sense of dread. The vanishings were indiscriminate, and no one, not even outsiders, was immune. Folklore intertwines with these events, creating a tapestry of superstition and ritual. Stories of shadowy figures, whispering voices, and lights flickering in the forest often accompany accounts of disappearances. Some villagers insist that the forest itself chooses who may leave and who must remain, while others claim secret rituals are performed to appease ancient forces, ensuring the safety of the community at the cost of the missing. The blending of human agency, cultural tradition, and environmental anomalies creates an ambiguity that investigators struggle to untangle, blurring the lines between natural explanation and supernatural possibility. The investigators' own experiences begin to reflect the village's uncanny influence. Dr. Korv and Dr. Malhotra reported sensations of being watched, fleeting shadows in the corner of their vision, and subtle sounds that seemed to follow them through the forest. Field notes describe moments of disorientation, sudden fog, and instruments failing without explanation. These first-hand accounts, combined with historical records and villagers' testimonies, heightened tension and underscored the notion that the vanishings were more than random occurrences, they were part of a pattern that demanded both respect and careful scrutiny. One of the most chilling revelations comes from comparative analysis. Investigators noted that disappearances occurred with startling regularity. Every few years, someone vanished in a specific area of the village, often near landmarks associated with ritual or forest edges. The intervals suggested that these were not chance events but rather a phenomenon governed by rules, timing, and possibly unseen agents. The realization that the disappearances were patterned, almost methodical, shifted the narrative from legend to something disturbingly plausible, a calculated system of concealment or extraction, whose purpose remained elusive. By the conclusion of this section, the vanishing phenomenon is established as the village's defining enigma. It is not merely the absence of cemeteries or the unmarked dead that captivates, it is the ongoing, living mystery of those who simply cease to exist, leaving behind questions, grief, and shadows. The pattern, while terrifying, offers investigators their first real understanding of the village's inner workings. Yet the deeper truth remains tantalizingly out of reach: what mechanism, cultural, environmental, or otherwise, lies behind these vanishings, and how far does the village's secret extend? These unanswered questions propel the narrative forward, creating tension and anticipation for the next stage, uncovering the rituals and ceremonies that may underpin the disappearances. As investigators prepare to explore hidden practices, secretive behaviors, and long-forgotten symbols, the stakes rise. The audience is left with a lingering sense of unease, a psychological grip that ensures continued engagement. The vanishings, while horrifying, are only a prelude to the revelation of the village's deeper, darker truths. The vanishings hinted at something deliberate, a hidden mechanism behind the disappearances, and the first real breakthrough came when investigators began uncovering evidence of rituals long concealed within the village. These were not casual superstitions or passing folklore, they were structured practices, passed down across generations, layered with secrecy and symbolism. Candles, carved stones, hidden chambers, and cryptic markings suggested a community that treated the disappearance of its people with ceremonial precision. The deeper the investigators delved, the more it became clear that the unmarked dead were part of an organized system, a culture in which ritual and concealment were inseparable. Dr. Rajiv Malhotra's anthropological analysis revealed patterns within these rituals that suggested purpose and consistency. Symbols etched into trees and walls, once dismissed by villagers as decorative, were aligned with cycles of the moon, seasonal shifts, and particular times of day. Certain open fields, previously thought to be unused farmland, contained arrangements of stones and depressions that corresponded with ceremonial layouts. It became apparent that the village's geography was not merely practical, it was ritualistic, designed to facilitate the disappearances and concealments, and structured around the rhythms of an older, almost forgotten calendar. Local testimony, carefully corroborated with archival and environmental evidence, provided insight into the emotional weight of these practices. Elder villagers spoke of rites conducted in silence, cloaked in secrecy, where participants were chosen for specific tasks related to the handling of those who vanished. Families themselves were often complicit, performing acts of grief that were both genuine and ritualized, ensuring that the process of disappearance remained embedded within the social fabric. The interplay between community participation and secrecy elevated the rituals beyond mere superstition, they were mechanisms of both control and protection, deeply entwined with the village's identity. Some rituals appeared designed to sanctify the dead in the absence of formal burial. Small offerings of food, candles, and personal belongings were placed in designated areas, often hidden beneath layers of earth or within chambers carved into the hillsides. Investigators found traces of these offerings, charred remains of candles, remnants of cloth, fragments of pottery, carefully preserved for centuries. Carbon dating confirmed that these practices were ancient, sustained over generations with meticulous care. The rituals were simultaneously intimate and communal, designed to honor those who had vanished while keeping their existence concealed from outsiders. Other ceremonies were more disturbing. Accounts suggest that certain disappearances were orchestrated in ways that blurred moral boundaries. Villagers spoke of initiation rites for youth, selection ceremonies for individuals deemed unfit or dangerous, and nocturnal processions into the forest where participants would never be seen again. While details were often vague, the consistency of the narratives across decades suggested a codified tradition. The investigators were confronted with a moral conundrum. The vanishings were both human and systemic, raising questions about consent, complicity, and cultural obligation that had no easy answers. A particularly haunting discovery came from one of the hidden chambers uncovered beneath the forest floor. It was small, windowless, and reinforced with stone walls, lined with remnants of ritualistic activity. Symbols etched into the walls, circular arrangements on the floor, and traces of fire suggested ceremonies conducted here over centuries. Investigators found no evidence of remains, but the space exuded a presence, a psychological weight that was difficult to articulate. Villagers confirmed the location was untouched, a sacred and forbidden place. The investigators realized that the village's secret was not just practical, it was performative, a set of rituals designed to maintain control over life, death, and memory. One of the most revealing elements was the villagers' response to outsiders. While initially wary, a few willing participants explained that the rituals were a protective mechanism. The disappearances were framed as a form of balance, ensuring the survival of the community and continuity of tradition. Yet the tension was palpable, each story was punctuated with warnings and visible fear. Investigators felt the psychological pressure of entering a culture where questions themselves could disrupt the delicate equilibrium. The rituals, it seemed, were as much about enforcing secrecy as they were about honoring the vanished. In reconstructing the ceremonies, the team noted recurring motifs. Circular arrangements, candlelight, whispered names, and specific timings all played a role. These elements suggested a symbolic framework that combined grief, reverence, and concealment. Some villagers believed that the rituals guided the souls of the vanished, ensuring they remained protected while hidden from the outside world. Others described the practices as a form of social regulation, maintaining the cohesion of the community by enforcing silence and ritualized compliance. The duality of purpose, spiritual and practical, added layers of complexity that made the mystery both compelling and terrifying. A turning point in understanding came when investigators noticed subtle links between the vanishings and seasonal cycles. Disappearances often clustered around specific times of the year, harvest, solstice, or other culturally significant dates. This alignment with natural and ritualistic rhythms indicated that the phenomenon was not random. The village, it appeared, had evolved a structured system that combined environmental observation, human behavior, and ceremonial practice to manage the unmarked dead. Every element, from geography to artifact placement, was meticulously orchestrated, suggesting a deliberate, centuries-old tradition of concealment. Emotional tension escalated as the human element became clearer. Families who had once spoken cryptically now shared small, deeply personal insights. A father who watched his son vanish during a ritual he could not interfere with, a grandmother who participated in ceremonies to honor missing relatives, and a mother who carried grief silently for decades. These accounts highlighted the psychological and cultural complexities of the village. The disappearances were not merely logistical or ceremonial, they were interwoven with personal trauma, collective memory, and a system of moral and social rules that outsiders struggled to comprehend. Investigators also encountered resistance. Attempts to document ceremonies, photograph symbols, or analyze ritual spaces were met with caution and sometimes outright obstruction. Villagers emphasized that the rituals were sacred and not meant for external scrutiny. This tension, combined with the eerie discoveries of tunnels, artifacts, and aligned structures, created an atmosphere of suspense that heightened the narrative. The rituals themselves were both revelation and enigma, offering glimpses into the village's inner workings while reinforcing the psychological hold the traditions maintained over the community. By the end of this section, the picture of the village as a place of ritualized concealment was undeniable. The vanishings, the unmarked dead, and the carefully structured ceremonies formed a complex, interconnected system. The audience is left with a profound sense of both awe and horror. The rituals, while deeply human, are enigmatic, disciplined, and morally ambiguous. They provide a cultural framework for understanding the disappearances, yet raise as many questions as they answer, setting the stage for the next chapter, the discovery of hidden chambers, underground passages, and shocking evidence that will bring the mystery to its apex. The investigation reached a turning point when the team discovered the first hidden chamber. Beneath the forest floor, just beyond the edge of a meadow that villagers referred to only in whispers as the forbidden place, lay a concealed entrance. The opening was small, masked by a tangle of roots and overgrowth, requiring careful maneuvering to access. Inside, the space was unexpectedly large, a network of tunnels and chambers carved with precision, reinforced by stone and timber. It immediately became clear that these were not natural formations, but the product of centuries of human labor. Initial exploration revealed traces of ceremonial activity. Charred remnants of candles, scattered fragments of pottery, and faded cloth were arranged in deliberate patterns. The walls bore symbols etched deep into the stone, some geometric, others more cryptic. Investigators quickly realized that these markings were consistent with the ritualistic practices described by villagers and recorded in oral histories. The chambers themselves seemed designed not merely for concealment, but as a controlled space for performing ceremonies related to the unmarked dead. Every element, from the architecture to the artifacts, suggested purpose and intent. What struck the team most was the psychological impact of the chambers. The air was thick, almost tactile, a mixture of damp earth and smoke residue from centuries of ritual fires. Shadows clung to the corners, and the muted echoes of footsteps created a sense of disorientation. Dr. Elena Korv, normally analytical and composed, described a profound unease, as if the space itself exerted a subtle pressure on the mind. The hidden chambers were not just physical structures, they were immersive environments designed to enforce secrecy, to manipulate perception, and to maintain control over knowledge of the vanished. Deeper into the network, the chambers became more intricate. Narrow tunnels led to rooms lined with stone depressions, shallow and circular, whose purpose was immediately unsettling. Investigators speculated that these may have been used to temporarily house bodies, or at the very least, to contain the evidence of disappearances. Yet no human remains were found, no bones, no ashes, no identifiable traces. This absence reinforced the village's pattern, meticulous concealment combined with ritualized practice. Whatever occurred here, it was systematic, intentional, and designed to erase evidence of mortality. One of the chambers contained a particularly striking arrangement of symbols and artifacts. A large circle, etched into the stone floor, was surrounded by smaller circles, each marked with faint carvings. Candles had been placed at precise intervals, and remnants of organic material were found within the smaller depressions. The investigators hypothesized that this configuration represented a ritualistic cycle, perhaps linked to the timing of disappearances, seasonal events, or the movement of the sun and moon. The precision of the layout suggested a sophisticated understanding of geometry and symbolism, preserved over generations, and tied directly to the village's control over death. Villagers' testimonies were critical in interpreting these discoveries. Some reluctantly confirmed that the chambers had been used for generations to manage disappearances in a way that honored the missing while protecting the living. Others hinted at darker purposes, describing initiation rites, sacrifices, or the selection of individuals whose absence served the community's stability. These accounts, combined with physical evidence, painted a picture of a society whose relationship with death was both reverent and methodical, blurring the line between care and control, ritual and concealment. Investigators also documented the environmental engineering of the chambers. Ventilation shafts were cleverly hidden within walls, allowing smoke from ritual fires to escape without leaving traces above ground. Drainage systems managed moisture and prevented decay from compromising the structures. Every detail of construction suggested that the chambers were intended for long-term use and secrecy. This level of foresight implied a continuity of knowledge across generations, a deliberate effort to preserve the rituals and concealment practices with unwavering discipline. The human dimension of these discoveries added an emotional weight that was difficult to process. Families of the vanished, when confronted with the chambers, expressed a mixture of relief and horror. Relief that the locations of ceremonies and disappearances were finally understood, horror at the realization of how systematic and methodical the village's concealment practices had been. One elder, tears in her eyes, described participating in rituals that ensured the safety of the community at the cost of public acknowledgement of the dead. The emotional resonance reinforced the story's depth, emphasizing that the chambers were not merely archaeological finds, they were repositories of grief, memory, and cultural obligation. The network extended far beyond initial expectations. Tunnels branched in multiple directions, some collapsing under centuries of neglect, others leading to chambers previously unknown even to the eldest villagers. Investigators mapped these passages, uncovering a labyrinth that suggested the village had been designed around concealment. Each branch offered new clues, faint markings, the remnants of ritual tools, and subtle depressions that aligned with the seasonal and ceremonial patterns already identified. The scale of the hidden network was staggering, revealing a village whose very infrastructure had been shaped by its relationship with the unmarked dead. Perhaps most unsettling were the spaces that appeared deliberately empty. Certain chambers had depressions and symbols but lacked artifacts or traces of ritual activity. Investigators speculated that these were reserved for vanishings that were planned but had not yet occurred, or for events meant to remain entirely hidden. The intentionality of absence heightened the psychological tension, suggesting that the village's system of concealment was proactive, predictive, and almost sentient in its design. Even the absence of evidence became evidence itself, a method of maintaining control over what the outside world could know. Discoveries of hidden chambers also shed light on the mechanics of the vanishings themselves. Investigators found evidence of strategic movement through the tunnels, paths connecting critical points within the village, and alignment of chambers with natural landmarks. It became increasingly apparent that the disappearances were not random or chaotic, they were carefully orchestrated, integrated with ritual, geography, and social practice. Each vanishing was a controlled event, monitored and managed to ensure secrecy and continuity. The meticulous design of the chambers reflected a society deeply invested in managing both the dead and the living, a community operating within rules that outsiders could scarcely comprehend. The most chilling revelation came from the psychological impact of uncovering the chambers. Investigators noted a pervasive sense of being watched, as if the village itself were alive, aware, and guarding its secrets. Even as physical evidence accumulated, the intangible pressure remained, the knowledge that human curiosity had breached boundaries meant to remain inviolate. Shadows seemed longer, footsteps echoed differently, and the air thickened with anticipation. The chambers, while concrete and accessible, carried an unseen force, a cultural, emotional, and almost mystical authority that enforced silence and maintained the village's long-standing equilibrium. By the end of this section, the investigators faced a sobering conclusion: the village's secrets were real, deliberate, and complex. The hidden chambers, tunnels, and artifacts revealed a society capable of controlling the fate of its dead with precision and reverence. Yet every discovery also posed new questions. How far did the network extend? Were there still undiscovered chambers? What cultural, social, or perhaps supernatural rules governed the disappearances? The audience, fully immersed in suspense, is left with a sense of awe, dread, and anticipation. The revelation of hidden chambers provides both clarity and an escalating tension, priming viewers for the next stage, where the full history, patterns, and darkest truths begin to coalesce. The section closes with a haunting observation: the village is more than a location, it is a living organism, shaped by centuries of ritual, concealment, and psychological control. The hidden chambers are the physical manifestation of this system, simultaneously revealing and concealing the truth. The investigators, and by extension the audience, are left standing at the threshold of understanding, aware that the final revelations are near, but that the full extent of the village's secrets, its unmarked dead, vanishings, and rituals, has yet to be fully grasped. With the hidden chambers mapped and ritual artifacts documented, the investigators turned their attention to historical records and long-term patterns of disappearance. Archival research revealed a chilling consistency: the vanishing phenomenon was not a recent occurrence but stretched back for centuries. Parish records, travelers' journals, and fragmented census data all hinted at missing individuals whose deaths were never formally recorded. Births and marriages were accounted for meticulously, yet final chapters of lives were conspicuously absent. The pattern was undeniable: generations of villagers had disappeared, leaving a trail of unanswered questions and invisible voids in the historical record. One particularly striking case involved the 18th-century diary of a local schoolmaster. In it, he recorded the disappearance of several children, noting their absence from school, the community's quiet resignation, and the whispers surrounding hidden rituals. His entries were matter-of-fact, almost clinical, yet they conveyed a subtle fear, suggesting awareness of forces beyond his understanding. When cross-referenced with neighboring town records, gaps appeared that confirmed the vanishings. Children who should have entered the local registry simply ceased to exist in any official documentation. These findings reinforced the theory that the disappearances were systematic, recurring, and culturally embedded. Investigators also identified patterns in the timing of vanishings. Disappearances clustered around specific seasons and events, often coinciding with harvests, solstices, or important communal festivals. Environmental factors such as fog, rainfall, and moonless nights were frequently reported alongside the events. By plotting disappearances on historical calendars, a rhythmic, almost ritualistic pattern emerged. It became clear that the village's vanishings were not random but synchronized with natural and social cycles, suggesting both planning and adherence to long-standing traditions. Further analysis revealed that disappearances were geographically concentrated. Certain forest edges, meadows, and depressions, previously noted during investigations of the hidden chambers, were repeatedly implicated in vanishing events. These hotspots aligned with symbolic markers in the village, areas associated with ceremonial practice and ritual observance. It was as if the village itself had been designed to facilitate the disappearances, guiding the flow of individuals toward specific locations where concealment could be ensured. Geography, ritual, and cultural practice merged to create a meticulously controlled environment. Cross-generational accounts provided additional clarity. Families often spoke of ancestors who participated in or witnessed disappearances, describing ceremonies, nocturnal processions, and symbolic offerings. Patterns emerged not only in the victims but in the community's behavior. Every vanishing was followed by ritualized acts of mourning, protective measures to ensure secrecy, and reinforcement of social cohesion. Investigators realized that the disappearances were deeply embedded within the village's social framework, functioning as both a mechanism of control and a cultural norm. One of the most compelling historical threads involved travelers who passed through the village. In multiple accounts from neighboring towns, outsiders reportedly vanished after brief encounters with villagers. Diaries described individuals who entered the village with curiosity or intent to trade and were never seen again. Local oral histories and written records confirmed these incidents, suggesting that the vanishings were not limited to residents but extended to outsiders who crossed invisible boundaries. This realization elevated the stakes. The phenomenon was not only systematic but also selectively enforced, preserving the village's secrecy and dominance over life and death. Historical research also uncovered hints of external influence. Some documents suggested that local authorities and religious figures had, over centuries, either ignored or tacitly approved the village's practices. Letters between parish officials and neighboring administrators indicated awareness of unusual mortality patterns, yet no intervention occurred. This complicity implied a broader understanding: or perhaps fear, of the rituals and the vanishings, reinforcing the notion that the village operated under a framework both autonomous and protected, where external scrutiny was either unwelcome or deliberately deflected. The investigators mapped these historical threads against the modern-day network of hidden chambers and tunnels. A convergence emerged. Locations implicated in centuries-old disappearances corresponded precisely with subterranean spaces uncovered during the current investigation. Symbols etched in stone, ceremonial arrangements, and environmental features all reflected a continuity of practice spanning generations. The village's history, geography, and ritualistic behaviors were interwoven into a single, deliberate system, demonstrating an astonishing level of organization and cultural preservation. The emotional impact on the investigation team was profound. The realization that these vanishings had persisted for centuries without interruption created a sense of awe, dread, and responsibility. Every discovery highlighted human resilience, secrecy, and the moral complexity of a community maintaining order through absence and ritual. Dr. Elena Korv noted the difficulty of reconciling empirical evidence with the intangible cultural forces at play, describing moments when the weight of history felt almost oppressive, as if the villagers' ancestors were watching from beyond, ensuring that their practices remained unbroken. Investigators also explored the social psychology of the disappearances. Patterns suggested that participation in the rituals created a cycle of compliance, fear, and tacit understanding among villagers. Children learned early to respect boundaries, elders reinforced secrecy, and families maintained a balance between grief and duty. The vanishings were not only physical events but cultural mechanisms, shaping behavior and identity over generations. This duality, systematic concealment intertwined with deeply human emotion, elevated the mystery from a series of disappearances to a profound exploration of societal control, morality, and the nature of memory. Comparative studies revealed subtle, almost imperceptible variations in practice over time. Early disappearances were sporadic, linked to seasonal events and natural cycles, while later vanishings showed increasing organization, consistent use of chambers, and precise ceremonial layouts. The investigators concluded that the village had refined its system, evolving from informal ritual to a codified, structured framework. The historical trajectory revealed a deliberate, long-term strategy, demonstrating a remarkable continuity and sophistication in the management of life, death, and secrecy. By the end of this section, the investigation reached a crucial realization: the patterns were not random coincidences, nor were the vanishings merely tragic accidents. The village had functioned as a controlled ecosystem, where disappearances were orchestrated, ceremonial, and socially enforced across generations. Historical records, oral testimonies, and physical evidence converged to confirm a chilling truth: the unmarked dead were part of an intricate cultural system, one that spanned centuries and incorporated geography, ritual, and social compliance. The section concludes with a mounting sense of anticipation. Investigators, armed with knowledge of patterns, historical continuity, and subterranean spaces, now face the ultimate question: what deeper truths remain hidden, and how far does the village's system of concealment extend? The audience is left on a precipice, fully immersed in suspense, with the expectation that the next stage of the story will unveil shocking connections, final revelations, and a confrontation with the full magnitude of the village's dark legacy. The culmination of months of investigation finally led to revelations that shook the team to its core. The hidden chambers, artifacts, and centuries-long patterns of disappearance were no longer abstract mysteries, they were tangible proof of a deliberately orchestrated system. Each element of the village, from its unmarked fields to its secret tunnels, had been carefully designed to conceal life, death, and the passage of time. The sheer scale of coordination, passed down through generations, was both awe-inspiring and horrifying, leaving investigators to confront a reality they had not fully anticipated. The first shock came with the discovery of previously unrecorded chambers, smaller and even more concealed than those already mapped. These spaces contained arrangements of symbols, depressions, and traces of ritualistic activity that were eerily consistent with other parts of the village, yet executed with a precision suggesting specialized knowledge. The investigators realized that certain villagers had acted as custodians of this knowledge, maintaining the secrecy and operational continuity of the concealment system for centuries. The level of dedication, discipline, and secrecy was staggering, revealing a social structure centered entirely around the management of vanishings. Artifacts recovered from these chambers offered disturbing insight. Candles, ceremonial cloth, and small objects of unknown significance were meticulously preserved, indicating rituals that had been performed countless times over the centuries. Some chambers even contained faint residues of organic material, suggesting that bodies had once been present and carefully removed. The investigators were faced with a chilling realization: the vanishings were not only intentional but also ritualized, each disappearance governed by rules, timing, and spatial precision. This was a system designed to endure, to control, and to erase evidence of mortality from the public record. The human element deepened the horror. Families who had historically participated in the rituals were still alive, their knowledge of the vanishings both intimate and guarded. One elder recounted his father leading him as a child into a chamber to perform the rites for a missing sibling, describing the fear, reverence, and unspoken rules that dictated their behavior. Villagers spoke of silence as a form of protection, where speaking of the vanished outside the community was considered dangerous. The investigators were confronted with the emotional and moral complexity of a society whose entire framework revolved around the concealment of life and death. The scope of disappearances also became clearer. Archival records, cross-referenced with oral histories, revealed that hundreds of individuals had vanished over centuries. Some were residents, others outsiders. Every case, while unique, adhered to recurring principles. Vanishings occurred near symbolic locations, coincided with specific temporal cycles, and were followed by ritualized acts of mourning or concealment. The investigators realized that they were not merely documenting isolated events, they were uncovering a meticulously maintained system that intertwined human emotion, geography, and ceremonial practice across generations. A particularly disturbing discovery involved the intentional manipulation of space. Certain chambers were aligned along subterranean tunnels in ways that corresponded with the village's geography, seasonal events, and symbolic markers. This alignment suggested planning that went beyond immediate concealment, pointing to a cultural strategy designed to integrate disappearances seamlessly into daily life and the natural environment. Every pathway, every chamber, and every artifact contributed to a network of concealment that was both functional and ritualistic, creating a reality where vanishings were normalized, controlled, and systematically managed. Investigators also uncovered evidence of a codified knowledge system, passed orally and visually through generations. Specific individuals within the village acted as stewards, maintaining ritual accuracy and secrecy, training the next generation, and ensuring that no detail of the vanishings or ceremonies was lost. This organizational structure revealed a level of sophistication that rivaled modern secret societies, demonstrating that the concealment of the dead was not merely cultural but methodical, disciplined, and intentionally preserved. The emotional impact on the investigative team intensified. Dr. Elena Korv described a profound sense of disorientation, as though the village itself exerted control over perception and understanding. Dr. Rajiv Malhotra noted the eerie resonance between ancient rituals and contemporary observations, describing moments when the patterns of vanishings, chambers, and symbols seemed almost alive, guiding investigators toward truths while maintaining an invisible grip on their psyche. The village's practices were not only historical or physical, they were psychological, creating an immersive, almost sentient atmosphere that demanded both respect and caution. As investigators pieced together the final elements of the puzzle, they confronted a moral and ethical dilemma: how should the findings be documented and shared? The vanishings, rituals, and hidden chambers revealed a community capable of extraordinary control over life and death, yet the knowledge was deeply human, tied to grief, culture, and survival. Each revelation brought with it a responsibility to convey truth without sensationalizing, to balance the horror of discovery with the empathy for those who had lived and perpetuated these traditions. The emotional gravity of these choices underscored the narrative tension, reinforcing the audience's engagement with both story and characters. One of the most shocking aspects of the revelations was the temporal persistence of the system. Evidence suggested that the village had refined its methods over centuries, evolving from informal ritual to a highly codified structure. Chambers became more elaborate, ceremonies more precise, and spatial organization more strategic. This evolution indicated not only continuity but also intentional adaptation, demonstrating that the village actively managed both secrecy and ritual with a forward-looking understanding of social cohesion, cultural preservation, and psychological control. The investigators also confronted the chilling possibility of ongoing disappearances. Patterns indicated that the system remained active, with certain areas of the village reserved for future vanishings. Observations of villagers' behavior suggested that knowledge of these practices was still maintained, silently enforced, and deeply respected. The audience is left with an unnerving awareness that the phenomenon is not merely historical, it is living, present, and potentially continuing. The realization of continuity escalates suspense and foreshadows the final, haunting revelations to come. Another revelation involved the integration of folklore with ritualized concealment. Shadowy figures, whispered names, and symbolic markings were not merely superstition, they were functional components of a system designed to enforce secrecy, ensure compliance, and guide disappearances. Folklore had become embedded in practice, creating an environment where myth and reality reinforced one another. The psychological dimension was as important as the physical. Fear, reverence, and social expectation were tools used to sustain the system, blending belief and control in ways both subtle and profound. As the section progresses toward its climax, the cumulative weight of the discoveries becomes undeniable. Hidden chambers, meticulously preserved artifacts, centuries of vanishings, coded knowledge, and the psychological resonance of ritual all converge to present a portrait of a community that has controlled life and death with remarkable sophistication. Investigators face a moment of reckoning, they understand the scope of what has transpired, yet the full moral and emotional implications remain almost impossible to process. The section concludes with a cinematic tension. The village is revealed not merely as a geographic location but as a living, breathing system, a society whose practices, vanishings, and rituals are designed to endure across generations. The investigators, and by extension the audience, are left grappling with the scale, sophistication, and moral ambiguity of these revelations. The full magnitude of the village's secret is finally in view, yet questions remain, propelling the narrative toward its haunting final chapter, where the implications for both villagers and the investigators reach their apex.